Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and one of the first to podcast on the Internet, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1386 of This Week in Amateur Radio, for the week beginning Sunday, September 21st, 2025. Amateur radio licenses are suspended in Equatorial Guinea. We will have the details. Changes are made to citizens band radio rules and amateur radio repeater regulations in Australia. A pirate FM broadcaster in New Jersey is presented with a $920,000 fine from the FCC. Amateur Radio Digital Communications, ARDC, is looking for volunteers for their 2026 committees. The ARRL launches a nationwide grassroots campaign to pass the Amateur Radio Preparedness Act in Congress. ARRL section managers attend a workshop at League headquarters. The Radio Society of Great Britain comments on the recent Ofcom consultation. Russia's mysterious shortwave station, UVB-76, resumes broadcasting cryptic messages. The ARRL has suggestions on participating in National Preparedness Month. AST Space Mobile is granted limited use of the 70-centimeter amateur radio band by the FCC, and Voyager 1 has been traveling in space now for 48 years. It is now almost one light day away. We will have the story in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will tell us how amateur radio has changed his worldview. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with part 1 of a brand new edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us back to 1922, where we find the steadily increasing use of CW paralleled exploration of ever shorter wavelengths, and the two pursuits complemented each other. Amateurs were setting new records at a whirlwind pace. This week's episode is entitled Trans-Pacifics. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our studio facilities here in beautiful downtown Albany, New York, where it's turning out to be a very colorful fall, I'm George, W2XBS.
And reporting from our bureau in Dallas, Texas, I'm Tammy, KI5ODE.
And reporting from our news bureau in Sandwich, Illinois, where I'm eagerly awaiting some more raindrops to fall from the sky to knock down all this dust, I'm Jordan Kurtz, Kilo Echo 9, Bravo, Papa Oscar.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
And from our studios in Naugatuck, Connecticut, where we're finally warming up into the upper 70s and 80s this week after several weeks of cool weather, I'm Steve Sawyer, K1FRC.
And reporting this week from the sleepy little town of Cortlandville, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting live from the warm and humid Space Coast in Florida, I am Ed Johnson, W2PH.
And reporting from our Trade New York News Bureau, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the western Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where the first twinges of orange and red and purple are just beginning to appear on maple trees in beautiful fall weather, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where autumn is in the air, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
Our lead story this week originates in Equatorial Guinea, where the government has suspended ham radio licenses after what it called unauthorized operations of a DXpedition. As de-expeditioners called off the 3C0W and 3C3W activations in Equatorial Guinea, the government suspended all amateur radio licenses in the country. Authorities made the announcement, saying that a visiting ham radio operator gained access to sensitive areas in the country with radio equipment that was unauthorized. The government announcement did not identify the radio operators, but various DX sites online listed Eurus YL2GM and Eugene EA5EL as de-expeditioners operating from Annobon Island in the South Atlantic Ocean. Both call signs were seen on the spotting clusters, with 3C0W's last spot made on September 11th, accompanied by the comment that there was bad news reported on the dxworld.net. The report said the operation had gone forward without properly verifying the legality of the equipment or the compliance of the assigned frequencies with national regulations. In its announcement, the Malabo government did not identify the call signs, but said that the hams had applied for licenses in 2018 and this year, but had not verified that the equipment to be used was in legal compliance. Eurus posted an update on DxWorld confirming that the team had not yet managed to get the local permit to operate as 3C0W in Annobon Island, and that they were returning to the mainland where they had previously had a successful activation as 3C3W. Meanwhile, authorities said that the suspension of licenses will enable the government to develop a new regulatory framework with respect to legal frequencies and equipment, an action it said also aligns with national security requirements. A government statement said the goal is to ensure that no high-frequency equipment enters the country without proper approval and review of the license. The news comes 1 month before the scheduled 3C2MD de-expedition of the Mediterraneo DX Club International, which is to operate from October 30th through November 11th. It is unclear what impact this move by the government will have on upcoming planned de-expeditions.
The Australian Communications and Media Authority is making changes to the Citizens Band Radio Station Class License rules of 2015, which are about to sunset. The regulator is remaking the rules with minor changes, saying that they reflect new developments in technology in the ensuing years. The ACMA characterized the changes as minor. They include permission to use FM, now 27 MHz, which was previously restricted to AM or single sideband. This aligns CB in Australia with operations in much of the rest of the world. The rule also removes the requirement that calls be initiated only on specific call channels, giving operators the freedom to begin contacts on channels they customarily use. The ACMA also declared it would no longer be responsible for taking action against such on-air behavior as harassment and threats, leaving enforcement issues instead to police and other authorities. For details about these and other changes, see the Australian Federal Register on the Internet. Meanwhile, the Australian regulator has updated its license conditions determination that covers amateur radio for repeater operators in external territories, and those hams who could not switch over to the class license system that was introduced in February of 2024. Beginning on September 30th, changes affecting amateur radio assigned and non-assigned licenses include removal of such restrictions on licensees transmitting messages with entertainment, commercial, or financial content. The update also requires that the qualified person be on site when an amateur station is located in an isolated area. The ACMA said that its purpose is making these and other minor changes was to fine-tune that language so it aligns more closely with the amateur class license.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
The FCC has taken action against a radio operator who the agency has charged with piracy. The Federal Communications Commission has given the operator of a New Jersey FM radio station 30 days to pay a penalty of $920,000 for what the regulator says is unlicensed operation of a radio station on 91.7 MHz. The commission identified the station as Radio Leave Campi, which is described on a number of websites online as having Haitian Creole programming. The station's operator, Massner Beauplan of Middletown, New York, has been assessed a forfeiture of $920,000 for what the Commission says were illegal broadcasts between November 16, 2023 and January 8, 2024. The FCC said that Beauplan had been sent a notice of apparent liability in September of 2024, but never responded. Failure to pay means that the regulator refers the case to the U.S. Justice Department, which is responsible for collecting the fines. The Preventing Illegal Radio Abuse Through Enforcement Act, or Pirate Act, of 2020 permitted the FCC to raise its fines when going after unlicensed broadcasters. Violating the Pirate Act carries a maximum penalty of approximately $2.4 million.
ARDC, Amateur Radio Digital Communications, is looking for volunteers to serve on one of 4 committees. They include the Grants Advisory Committee, which helps identify potential grant-making opportunities, the Technical Advisory Committee, which provides input on policies and technologies for 44Net, amateur radio's Internet IP address space, the Grants Evaluation Team, whose responsibilities include reporting on the results of funded grants, and the Contact Review Committee, which oversees compliance with the Code of Conduct. The ARDC also needs 44Net portal ticket handlers who help verify call signs and other information for 44Net address space and help on its grants communications team, whose members write summaries to share with the public about the results of ARDC-funded grants. Details about the application process, volunteer qualifications, and time commitments for any of these posts can be found on the ARDC's website and blog. Most volunteers serve for a 1-year term from January through December. Committee time commitments range from 2 to 5 hours a week. The application windows to apply for an ARDC committee is open between September 16 and December 31. For those interested in applying may do so through a simple form. See the ARDC website for more details.
ARRL has launched a nationwide grassroots campaign aimed at securing the passage of federal legislation that would grant amateur radio operators the same rights to install antennas on their property as those enjoyed by users of TV antennas, wireless internet, and flagpoles. With more details on the campaign and how you can get involved, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, who files this report from League headquarters.
The campaign, announced in an ARRL member bulletin on September 17, 2025, follows the reintroduction of the Amateur Radio Emergency Preparedness Act in February 2025. The bipartisan bills, H.R. 1094 in the House and S.459 in the Senate, are designed to prevent restrictive homeowners association (HOA) rules that currently prohibit or severely limit the installation of amateur radio antennas, even when such antennas are hidden in trees, placed in attics, mounted on vehicles, or look like flagpoles. This legislation is about restoring equal rights to licensed amateur radio operators, said ARRL President Rick Roderick. These restrictions hinder not only the enjoyment of amateur radio, but also its vital role in emergency communications during disasters. To advance the legislation, ARRL is calling on its members and all licensees of the U.S. Amateur Radio Service to take action by sending letters to their congressional representatives. Through a dedicated online tool at https://sendaletter.org HOA, hams can easily generate and submit pre-drafted letters with just a few clicks. Go there and help us by sending your letters to representatives and senators. ARRL has emphasized that every letter matters. Your representatives and senators need to know that the passage of this legislation is important to you. And you can find more information on how and where to send those letters at arrl.org. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Your support helps ARRL engage legislative leaders to pass this bill and provide the ability of amateur radio operators to install the antennas necessary to serve their restricted land use communities. And ARRL CEO David Minster, NA2AA, will join host Josh Nass, KI6NAZ, on his YouTube channel, Ham Radio Crash Course, to discuss the just-launched grassroots campaign to pass the Amateur Radio Emergency Preparedness Act. Minster will demonstrate an online tool to engage all hams in supporting ARRL's federal legislative push to pass the bill.
ARRL section managers from around the country were at ARRL headquarters for a training workshop on September 13, 2025. They visited with program leaders from across the headquarters staff to learn about all the ways ARRL serves members. Within the ARRL field organization, section managers are the key frontline volunteers. There are 71 sections spread across the Western Hemisphere. Section manager is elected to 2-year terms by ARRL members who live in their sections. In attendance were Jimmy Russ, AB4KA of the West Central Florida section, Craig McVeigh, N0CSM of the Nevada section, Jay Ballinger, N6SAC of the Sacramento Valley section, Ralph Katz, AA8RK of the Michigan section, Barry Bulow, W0IY of the Iowa section, David Overton, W5JDO of the West Texas section, Nomar Vizcarrando, NP4H of the Northern New Jersey section, and Don Lynn, ND7L of the Idaho section.
The Federal Communications Commission approved limited use of amateur frequencies for 20 satellites to be developed by a Texas broadband company. The FCC's Space Bureau said in a statement that it was giving permission to AST Space Mobile to use frequencies between 430 and 440 megahertz on an emergency basis only. The regulator said its move was in direct response to overwhelming concerns raised by amateur radio operators. Citing potential interference among their issues, member societies of the International Amateur Radio Union, AMSAT, the ARRL, and individual amateurs worldwide also argued that alternate UHF allocations exist for the satellite telemetry, tracking, and command functions. More than 2,500 comments were submitted to the FCC. The FCC's action gives use of the amateur frequencies to the satellites for no more than a 24-hour period. The amateur radio 70-centimeter band is used by hams worldwide for such applications as mobile FM voice, analog and digital television, digital data transmissions, amateur radio satellites, and weak signal communications on SSB and CW. AST Space Mobile ultimately plans a full constellation of 248 satellites for broadband service from space.
An enthusiastic team of operators felt swept away by the challenge of their recent islands on the air expedition to the Bajaros Rocks off the Chilean coast. Then something else was swept away, almost all of their equipment. The lost equipment includes the KPA 500, one IC 7000, 7 Dunestar 300 band pass filters, 2 laptops, 2 multiband antennas, 1 2-element Yagi, 1 Honda EU22i generator, 2 fiberglass masts, personal clothing, and more. This equipment and more are all gone now from the rock where the team on IOTA number SA100 began operating on August 18th as 3 Golf 1 Papa. Ocean swells, considered the worst seen in 5 years, forced Caesar, Victor Echo 3, Lima Yankee Charlie, Philippe, X-Ray Quebec 7, India Romeo, and Johann, Papa Alpha 3, Echo X-Ray X-Ray, to be evacuated by the Chilean Coast Guard 3 days later. Wearing wetsuits, the hams swam to the rescuers' boats, eyeing the carefully packed-up equipment they had to leave behind on the rock. Already they were making plans to return for its retrieval. Sea conditions prevented anyone from gaining access to the rock again until August 26th. Afterward, the team wrote on their website, "Very bad news. There is absolutely nothing there except for the beam antenna that we left anchored, which has been damaged." They believe that all else was swept away by the sea. The de-expeditioners went on to express their utmost gratitude to those who supported this challenging project and those who generously contributed toward the replacement cost of their lost equipment and personal belongings.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
The shortwave radio station UVB-76, famously known as The Buzzer and located near Moscow, Russia, has resumed broadcasting encrypted messages after years of continuous monotone buzzing. Since the 1970s, the station has been known for its persistent droning sound, but recently it interrupted this usual broadcast twice to transmit coded messages consisting of Russian words, numbers, and cryptic codes. Among the transmitted messages, the previously used call sign NZHTI appeared, alongside sequences of numbers such as 38, 965, 78, 58, 88, 37. Some listeners speculated that these numbers might represent geographical coordinates. A video of the broadcast quickly spread on social media. Professor David Stupples, who teaches electronics and radio engineering at City University, London, suggested that the Russian government likely operates the station. He noted this might be a security measure and is unlikely to serve peaceful purposes. Operating continuously since at least the mid-1970s, UVB-76 transmits on the 4,625 kHz shortwave frequency, emitting a persistent buzzing sound interspersed with occasional voice messages. These spoken broadcasts often include lists of names, numerals, or coded phrases delivered in a flat, mechanical tone by both male and female voices. According to Priom.org, a respected monitoring group of radio observers, UVB-76 is believed to be part of a military communications network linked to Russia's Western Military District. Its messages have been categorized into three general types: monolith, user, and command, each believed to correspond to different levels or types of military operations. Arie Bender, a Dutch radio researcher, reflected on various theories about the station that have emerged over the years. Some say it is an old Soviet dead man switch that would trigger a nuclear attack on the West if the buzzing stops. Others believe it is a signal for UFOs or even a mind control device, he explained. UVB-76 attracted the attention of amateur radio enthusiasts starting in the 1980s. From the 1990s onward, it became known for its regular buzzing noises, occasionally interrupted by random names, words, and numbers. Some researchers argue that this variety suggests the station serves more than just an ordinary emergency frequency. Measurements by Professor Stupples show that the station broadcasts with thousands of watts of power reaching in all directions. Whether the latest messages can be decoded remains uncertain. However, much like during the Cold War, the Doomsday Radio station continues to provoke curiosity and unease in the international community today. Meanwhile, Russia has launched the Bayan M No. 2 spacecraft carrying, wait for it, 75 mice and 1,500 flies in the polar orbit to study how they respond to the polar radiation environment.
4 research volunteers will soon participate in NASA's year-long simulation of a Mars mission inside a habitat at the agency's Johnson Space Center in Houston. This mission will provide NASA with foundational data for human exploration of the Moon, Mars, and beyond. Ross Elder, Ellen Ellis, Matthew Montgomery, and James Spicer enter into the 1,700-square-foot Mars Dune Alpha habitat on Sunday, October 19th, to begin their mission. The team will live and work like astronauts for 378 days, concluding their mission on October 31st, 2026. Emily Phillips and Laura Marie serve as the mission's alternate crew members for this Houston event.
The Radio Society of Great Britain has responded to a further Ofcom consultation, which would see new users sharing spectrum within the 2.3 GHz amateur band. The latest proposals would enable a new class of short-notice outdoor deployments in the 2,320 to 2,340 MHz range for up to 14 days at a time. In its response, the Radio Society of Great Britain has taken the opportunity to highlight strong concerns regarding the UK amateur weak signal segment at the 2,320 MHz frequency. This follows earlier Ofcom proposals last year for indoor use only in this frequency range.
Radio amateurs are valuable resources to their communities in times of crisis. Here with this week's information for National Preparedness Month is John Ross, KD8IDJ.
This week, hams in Connecticut were featured in news coverage as they participated in a mass casualty drill with the St. Vincent Medical Center in Bridgeport. Several scenarios played out in which amateur radio volunteers helped the hospital connect with other medical facilities, including a targeted cyber attack, mass shootings, and explosions. While radio can provide resilience to communities, preparedness for those who would operate the radios begin at home. During National Preparedness Month, ARRL is sharing resources from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, on how to be prepared. The starting point for building your own resilience is to understand what threats you face in your area. On the website, www.ready.gov, there are tools to learn what disasters could impact your specific area and how to prepare for them. ARRL Director of Emergency Management Josh Johnson, KE5MHV, says a plan should be tailored to threats you're likely to face. Well, we should all be ready for anything. There are going to be threats specific to a region. Everyone should be well aware of the events that happen in your area, he said. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
There is additional information on the FEMA website to learn about region-specific disasters such as hurricanes. Radio amateurs are encouraged to find an Aries group in their area at www.arrl.org/Aries.
It is with great pleasure that AMSAT announces 2 recipients of the Gridmaster Awards in the past week. Bruce Robertson, VE7PTN, has achieved AMSAT Gridmaster Award number 74 by confirming all 488 Maidenhead grid squares in the continental United States. In his announcement, Bruce thanked everyone for the QSOS and especially the rovers. Thanks for roving. His recognition of the portable operators who make rare grids possible underscores the community spirit at the heart of this award. Grace Pape, K8LG, has also earned the AMSAT Gridmaster Award, becoming recipient number 73. Like all Gridmasters, this reflects years of dedication in working and confirming all 488 CONUS grids. Her achievement places her in the very small circle of operators who have reached this milestone.
Here are the results of the recent section manager nomination period for the term beginning January 1st, 2026. The following are declared elected with no opposition. New section managers in Michigan, Ralph Katz, AA8RK. In Santa Barbara section, Keith Elliott, W6KME. Continuing section managers are as follows. In Alabama, Dennis Littleton, K4DL. In Alaska, David Stevenson, KL7EB. In Delaware, Stephen Keller, KC3DSO. In the East Bay section, Mike Patterson, N6JGA. In Kansas, Ron Cowan, KB0DTI. In New Mexico, Bill Matter, K8TE. And in Tennessee, David Thomas, KM4NYI. And in the Western Massachusetts section, Ray LaJoy, AA1SE. The ARRL field organization is the grassroots core that makes up the 60,000 volunteers among ARRL members. It is divided into 71 sections, each of which is led by a volunteer section manager who is elected by the members of that section. Section managers serve 2-year terms.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX as part of Ham Radio's oldest ham radio magazine on the air, This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Bill, AJB. As of this Saturday, there will be 95 days until Christmas. Time is flying, so we better get started. The DX word for this week is gray line. I use this term weekly, but I'm not sure that everyone knows what it is. The gray line, also known as the Terminator, refers to the band around the Earth that separates daylight from darkness. Essentially, the transition zone between night and day. This region is significant in HF propagation because it offers enhanced conditions for long-distance communication. Why is this important? Well, we get improved signal propagation during the gray line. During sunrise and sunset, the ionosphere undergoes rapid changes. The D layer, which absorbs HF signals, weakens, while the F layer, which reflects HF signals, remains active, allowing signals to travel farther for a little bit longer time. For DXers, amateur radio operators often take advantage of gray line propagation to make contacts with distant stations that would otherwise be unreachable. Well, how does this phenomenon work? As the sun rises or sets, the ionospheric layers change in density and composition. Signals transmitted along the gray line path can reflect more efficiently off of the ionosphere. This effect is most pronounced for stations located along the same gray line path that you are. Now notice I said nothing about solar cycle or sunspots. I've been able to work gray line stations at the peak of the sunspot cycle and at the bottom of the cycle. So you should always check the gray line if that's a good time for you to be in your station. If you're interested, there's a DX workshop in Bowling Green, Kentucky on Saturday, October 4th. The sessions will cover DX basics and overview, DX operating techniques, and RF propagation. Check out wkdxa.org/events for more details, or you can contact me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. I can guarantee that this will be the best $15 you've spent for a day of DX networking and learning. Each week I try to focus on those entities that will be available on the next 7 days. There's so much data to sift through that I thought a focus on the next week might be helpful. Here's what you should find QRV when you tune the bands. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, as many of my listeners have done, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com and I'll take care of it. The CY0S DXpedition team is pleased to announce the official dates for the Sable Island DXpedition. These dates are March 19th to the 31st, 2026. Quote, our team would like to thank Matthew Destus, the Parks Canada Sable Island manager, for working with our team and approving these dates. In the last few weeks, preparations have ramped up for the DXpedition. The Yagi antennas for 10 and 20 meters have been cleaned, assembled, and tested. They are now safely stored in their respective ski bags. Work is ongoing with the spider poles and the low-band antennas. Work should be completed with those antennas in October. As we've done in the past, we will personally transport all of the gear to Halifax, Nova Scotia, shortly before the DXpedition. We've been informed by Sable Aviation that the cost of these flights to the island have significantly increased since 2023. Fundraising has now officially begun for the CY0S DXpedition. Donations of any amount can be made through our website at cy0s.com. We also have an update from the Victor 6 Delta team, who will be QRV from Chuuk, Micronesia, September 22 to October 6th. Quote, we are currently in the final stages of distributing luggage to team members throughout Germany. Our well-organized, quote, light DXpedition to Micronesia begins in 10 days. Our group is flying from Berlin via Helsinki, Tokyo, and Guam to Chuuk. All members have received their ESTA authorization, which is required for entry into Guam. We are very pleased to have received support for the DXpedition from Elecraft. We will now mainly use the excellent K4 transceivers as our station transceivers. Apart from the support for the DXpedition, several team members have invested heavily in upgrading their equipment. Most of the extensive technical equipment is privately owned by the team members. This time, we are bringing one of the flexible 18-meter-long spider beam fiberglass masts for the 80 and 160-meter antennas. We will therefore switch between 80 and 160 at night. The remaining low-band antennas will be implemented with a robust 12-meter and 14-meter-long fiberglass poles from spider beam for wire loops and verticals. The 6-meter antenna will also be mounted on one of these masts.
As you know, we always try to provide attractive QSL cards. We aim to print these within 4 weeks after the expedition. We expect to start QSL traffic sometimes in November. Requests via OQRS are preferred, with paid direct cards being processed free. Free bureau cards can also be requested via OQRS. However, these requests will be processed after the direct applications. Of course, we also use LOTW. Direct LOTW requests will be processed immediately. The complete log will be uploaded to LOTW 6 months after the DXpedition. Hams who donate $10 will automatically be published on our homepage and receive their QSL as soon as the cards are printed. All team members are looking forward to the DXpedition and to bringing you many QSOs on all bands and modes. We'll see you on the bands." End quote. DK3RN Peter will be in Kyrgyzstan until September 29th, visiting a technical university for a cooperation project. He plans to operate Echo X-ray stroke DK3RN, mostly CW and possibly sideband on 20 and 15 meters. He will not be working FT8. Split operation will be used to manage pileups. On Friday, September 26th, he will operate portable from mountains near Bishkek, weather permitting. Other days, activities will depend on local conditions. The Saudi Amateur Radio Society announces, in celebration of the 95th observance of the Saudi National Day, special event stations: Hotel Zulu 95 November Delta, 7 Zulu 95 November Delta, and 8 Zulu 95 November Delta. And they are all currently QRV until September 23rd. We have a station in Iraq, YI9 Whiskey Papa Zulu, which is being operated by IZ5 WPX. They will finish, he says, quote, around the end of November. Tony says he has 500 watts to a wire antenna on HF and sideband. QSL via IZ5 WTV with details on his QRZ.com page. It appears the club log and LOTW will also work for him. JA1ZLO/JD1 will be QRV from Ogasawara until the 24th. The stations will be an FT891, IC705, and IC9700, using 50 watts to a wire dipole on a fishing rod support, covering HF 2 meters and 432. His modes will be phone, CW, and FT8. Confirmation will be through Club Log, and they are working on setting up Logbook of the World. And these folks are from the University of Tokyo Amateur Radio Club. Fox Papa 5 Kilo Echo is currently QRV until September 26th from St. Pierre and Miquelon. They've been very active, appearing all over the bands. And as I look right now, I see 4 active spots for them on 4 different band modes. A holiday-style activity is now QRV from Tango 32 Eastern Kiribati for roughly 2 weeks on 80, 40, 20, 15, 12, and 10 sideband only. T32K/P will mean it's portable from one of the tiny islets, such as Cook, Wood, or Arthur. All of these are considered to be IOTA Oceania-024. The operators of T32K is VK4MAP Darren. He says that he has his usual QSL policy, direct to VK4MAP for US dollars and SASE for international. Rick, WE9G/KH2, has been QRV from Guam until September 26, planning to do some SO2R operating, mostly digital, with, quote, some sideband and CW 160 through 6. He will be working on a QSL card, which will be direct or bureau to WE9G or Club Log. He prefers traditional paper QSL cards. SASEs or USD to cover his costs are appreciated but not required. Likewise, any PayPal donations by email to him would be appreciated. He answers all cards in this priority. First, cards received with Please QSL. Next, PayPal or OQSL direct requests. And finally, bureau requests. Email him if you need to note a correction in your QSO file. Recently, activity as VK2/SP9FIH on Lord Howe. Janu should be QRV by now from Christmas Island, VK9/SP9FIH. That stop goes to October 3rd. He notes that in Australia, sideband is permitted on 30 meters, which is why he has listed that frequency for sideband. Excuse me. And remember, in the United States, we do not have 30-meter sideband privileges. OQRS direct requests will be uploaded to LOTW within a few days, bureau requests answered in about a year, and paper QSLs when he's home in Poland. He is seeking sponsors, and you can check it out at vk9.theexpeditions.org. The DX Mentor features a new podcast and YouTube episode this weekend with Bob, WB2UBW, discussing his journey, the Western Kentucky DXA, and the upcoming DX workshop. Check it out and let me know what you think. If you're interested in DX podcasts and YouTube channels, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be kept up to date on all of the DX activities. Well, I have one contest update. I know that the ARL contest sheet is read elsewhere in this podcast, and the contests that I mention are sometimes redundant. However, there are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or work all-time new ones. The CQ Worldwide RIDI contest is the second contest of the season for me. It is not like, quote, the old days with ink, paper dust, bits of paper flying around, paper tapes, the smell of oil, and the noise. Boy, do I miss the noise. In 2024, there were 3,431 logs submitted, and of course that's only a percentage of the total people that participated from one time or another. Whether you are a serious contester or you just like to get on the air, this is a good contest to do that. I thought I would share a bit of info for your edification, and this all comes from CQ Worldwide, rtty.com/rules.htm. The contest is held September 27th and 28th from 000 Zulu Saturday, which is Friday night, through 2400 Zulu on Saturday, or 7:59 p.m. Eastern. Only on 80, 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters can this be conducted. The contest exchange is RST plus your CQ zone. Stations in the U.S. and Canada also sends QTH as state. So for me, it would be 59904 Ohio. I hope to see you in the contest mix, and let me know if you participate and how you do. Please send me an email if you need any details on this topic or anything else that was mentioned. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB saying 7-3, and thanks to my ex-pal Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pileups. Have a great DX week.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
Welcome to the 43rd segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio, Ham's organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Our thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website in the presentation of these segments. Now follow with us as we bring you this next chapter of Ham Radio History. Trans-Pacifics. Steadily increasing use of CW paralleled exploration of ever shorter wavelengths, and the two pursuits complemented each other. Amateurs were setting new records at a whirlwind pace. CW use in traffic handling had grown tremendously in the past year, and in June 1922, ARRL message traffic on CW exceeded that on Spark for the first time. By the following February, CW traffic accounted for nearly 90% of the total. Hams across the country found CW especially effective in summer when it pierced through QRN better than Spark. In California, the Seafred brothers switched to CW, their 5-watt station easily outperforming their high-power Spark for their active message relay work. And in New England, Vermilia reported that he was setting up a 2-day-per-week unidirectional relay schedule with British 2KW, his relaying partner during the transatlantic tests. The first round-trip relay between the East Coast and the territory of Hawaii was accomplished with only one intermediary. It started in October with ARRL traffic manager Fred Schnell on the air at 1AW trying to set a new record for the number of messages handled in a single month. He had been making good progress on Spark until Maxim's high-speed rotary gap broke down. Not wanting to give up the record attempt, he and Maxim quickly assembled a CW transmitter using 4 5-watt tubes and a rectified AC power supply. Since the Spark transmitter was in the basement and the CW transmitter could not be operated remotely, they had to extend the single conductor antenna lead into the operating room. Doing so detuned Maxim's big fan antenna, making it impossible to tune it down to 200 meters. so they lowered the fan and hoisted a single wire vertical up the 80-foot mast and continued. Schnell was able to handle 743 messages that month with the makeshift setup, setting a new record, which was almost immediately outdone by 3ZO with 928, also on CW. Having successfully met his goal, Schnell continued to operate and happened to work Lloyd Berkner, 9AWM in Sleepy Eye, Minnesota, in the early morning hours of 21 November. Berkner told Schnell that he had been in regular direct contact with Clifford Dow, 6ZAC in Wailuku, manager of the two-person Hawaiian division of the ARRL, 60Q in Honolulu being the other member. Seeing an opportunity to set yet another record, they quickly arranged a sked for the following night to try a message relay. Conditions seemed promising. 9AWM made contact with 6ZAC and then called 1AW around 4:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Schnell, standing radio watch, heard the call and immediately woke Maxim, who rushed downstairs to the operating room to man the station himself for the relay attempt. At 4:58, he sent the first message. Number 1 Hartford, 6ZAC. Clear and cold here tonight. How with you, Maxim? Maxim and Schnell waited anxiously as he listened to 9AWM retransmit their message. At 5:04, 9AWM called 1AW with a reply from 5,000 miles away. Number 1, Wailuku. 1AW, fair and warm, Dow. 6 minutes, 38 seconds round trip was just a few seconds longer than the January 1921 transcontinental relay record. After a short celebration, Maxim sent a second message. Number 2, Hartford. 6ZAC. What time is it there? 1AW. To which the reply was, Number 2, Wailuku. 1AW. 11:35. Dow. The relayed messages conveyed weather and time, quintessential radio topics dating back to the first broadcasts from Arlington. Their exchange took 4 minutes and 18 seconds round trip from Hartford, Connecticut to Wailuku, Hawaii, a new record. Even more impressive was the fact that none of them was running particularly high power, 250 watts at 9AWM, 50 at 6ZAC, and only 20 at 1AW. CW was the key. In February 1923, a West Coast amateur aboard a ship bound for the China coast reported being able to copy U.S. stations along the entire trip. This meant that signals from American amateurs had now been heard in all continents or nearby waters beyond North America, Europe, South America, Australia, and Asia. Californians 6ZZ and 6KA held the distinction of being the only two American stations that had been heard in both Europe and Asia. By spring, with the sunspot minimum over and solar cycle 16 just beginning, more records were being shattered at 200 meters, including the first Trans-Pacific tests in May. They were organized by the Long Beach Radio Club, the Radio Journal, a collection of southwestern U.S. amateurs, and the Wireless Institute of Australia. Set up similarly to the transatlantics, it included both assigned transmitting periods for stations sending code groups and free-for-all sessions during which anyone could participate. At 10 p.m. on 1 May, the ether was torn wide open by scores of brand-new ether busters, each eager to be the first across, wrote QST technical editor Robert S. Cruz. Unfortunately, an error had been made. 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time is 4 p.m. in Australia, and 7,000 miles in daylight is asking quite a bit for even an American amateur station. On the 15th, the schedules were changed, running tests from 1 to 4 a.m., which is 7 to 10 p.m. in Australia. Everyone was in sync for the second try. Bernice Bitts, 6JD in Los Angeles, who had made a name for himself during the transcontinental relays, was the first station to be received, and not just his call sign. He managed to get a 17-word message to Australia, along with 3 others to New Zealand. Messages from 5 other U.S. stations were copied as well. As excitement built among hams in Australia and New Zealand, listening for North American stations became a nightly routine, referring to the sport as Yank logging. In New Zealand, hams were putting their energy into advancing the radio art despite a restrictive regulatory environment and were making contact with their nearby colleagues in Australia. They were only permitted to transmit with 50 watts on 180 meters maximum wavelength. The government charged the license fee even for receiving, and its regulations prescribed a penalty of £10 or imprisonment for 3 months for using a single-circuit tuner or any other arrangement that unduly energizes the antenna. Nevertheless, the New Zealand Wireless and Broadcasting News reported that yank logging in late afternoons and evenings was widely popular. One prominent amateur, F.D. Bell, who had been receiving stations for quite some time, reported being inundated with letters from the States requesting signal reports. Since altering my tuner to go down to 200 meters, during 10 evenings listening, I have logged a total of 39 U.S. amateurs situated in every district except the 2nd. On the evening of Easter Sunday, the QRM among the Yanks on 200 meters was simply astonishing. The problem was not so much to hear them as to separate them. We'll continue this segment next week. Included in this material are quotes from the following. F.H. Schnell, The Operating Department, QST, August 1922, page 30. F.H. Snell, The Operating Department, QST, April 1923, page 34. The Operating Department, QST, February 1923, page 50. S. Cruz, 10,000 miles in 4 minutes, QST, January 1923, page 11. K.B. Warner, Pacific Completely Bridged by Amateur Signals, QST, February 1923, page 27. S. Cruz, The Passing of the Pacific, QST, August 1923, page 7. With a tip of the TWIR cap to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for giving us permission to use his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, as we prepared this segment, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. The other day I went for a walk. I know, shock horror, outside daylight nature, the whole thing, in a local national park, for the first time in too many years. Almost immediately I noticed that this would be an excellent location for an activation. If you're not familiar, it's an amateur radio excuse to set up a portable station in a new location. In this case, potentially something called POTA, or Parks on the Air, but you don't need to find a formal activity with rules to get on air and make noise. I commented on how easily accessible it was, that it had picnic tables, gazebos for shelter, nearby toilets, free barbecues, ample parking, lots of open space, and no overhead power lines. I saw one solar panel on a pole and no evidence of any other electrical noise sources. It wasn't until later that I realized the act of noticing this in that way, with those details, is not something I would have done before becoming a radio amateur. I'd have looked at the same location, considered its beauty and serenity, and perhaps in passing considered that we could have a family gathering or a place to come back to when I wanted some peace and quiet, or a place where I might have a barbecue with friends. Not that those things went away, just that I noticed other things now that I'm an amateur. It made me consider just how much this hobby has irrevocably changed me. I know I've mentioned this before. Since becoming an amateur, I cannot walk down the street without noticing TV antennas pointing in the wrong direction. But this change in me is not limited to that. Now I cannot help discussing the best place to put a Wi-Fi base station in a building, or thinking about and checking on solar activity, wondering about battery capacity, RF interference, trees to potentially use as skyhooks for wire antennas, power company substations, pole-top transformers, random weird and wonderful antennas, and probably more. The point being that this hobby opens the door to a whole new way of looking at the world, and I don't think I've overstated if I say that amateur radio has literally changed my worldview. In considering this, I suspect it's related to a cognitive bias known as the frequency illusion, where you notice a specific concept, word or product more often after becoming aware of it. You might, for example, have experienced this with the brand or model of radio you use and suddenly discovered that there's lots of other amateurs talking about that particular piece of equipment. I've seen this with recurring topics during the past 14 years of the weekly F-TroopNet. For example, every couple of years someone discovers magnetic loop antennas and starts talking about how they've built or bought one. The conversation inevitably goes past variable capacitors through air variable capacitors onto vacuum variable capacitors, and then the conversation generally stops. While it's happening, multiple people come on the same journey, only to follow the exact same path. Several years later, the cycle repeats. Don't misunderstand, I welcome the discussion, point people at relevant resources and help them on this journey. I'm commenting on the recurrence of the journey, not the nature of it, because it's easy to take this example and hold it up as there's nothing new in this hobby. But nothing could be further from the truth. In my opinion, the level of complexity associated with radio communications is infinite, and anyone, including you and I, can contribute to the discovery associated with it. So what things have you noticed that were caused by this somewhat eccentric hobby, and perhaps the phenomenon of frequency illusion? I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
As the tornadoes that struck Massachusetts on September 6, 2025 demonstrate, you need to be ready for an emergency ahead of time. Radio amateurs were able to serve their communities and the National Weather Service because they were prepared. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has released a list of supplies to keep in an emergency supply kit, which includes things like food, water, medications, a first aid kit, and other useful items, but hams may want to take it a step further. ARRL Director of Emergency Management Josh Johnston, KE6MHB, says hams should make sure their stations are resilient, have a battery backup or alternate means of power. The grid may go down. Make sure your antennas are functional and that you have backups in case they are damaged. It may be a good idea to keep a few balun and some spools of wire to quickly erect antennas if needed, he said. In addition to having these items, Johnson says to test and exercise the equipment throughout the year. Consider getting your emergency gear out and doing a shakedown of it during a Parks on the Air operation. It puts your station to the test, gets you active on the air, and can be a fun activity done year-round. Find more information about resilience and preparedness through amateur radio at arrl.org/ARES.
This November marks a quarter century of continuous human presence aboard the International Space Station. And to kick off the Orbiting Laboratory's Silver 25th Anniversary Countdown, here are a few silver-themed science investigations that have advanced research and space exploration. Silver has been used for centuries to fight infection, and researchers use its unique properties to mitigate microbial growth aboard the space station. In space, biofilms have become resistant to traditional cleaning products and could infect water treatment systems, damage equipment, and pose a health risk to the astronauts. The bacterial adhesion and corrosion investigation studied bacterial genes that contribute to the formulation of biofilms and tested whether a silver-based disinfectant could limit their growth. Another experiment focused on the production of silver nanoparticles aboard the space station. Silver nanoparticles have a bigger surface-to-volume ratio, allowing silver ions to come in directly contact with more microbes, making it a more effective antimicrobial tool to help protect the crew from potential infection on future space missions. Silver is a high-conductivity precious metal that's very malleable, making it a viable option for smart garments. NASA astronauts aboard the orbiting laboratory tested a wearable monitoring vest with silver-coated sensors to record heart rates, cardiac mechanics, and breathing patterns while they slept. In microgravity, there is no up or down, and weightlessness does not allow particles to settle, which impact physical and chemical processes. Researchers use this unique microgravity environment to grow larger and more uniform crystals unaffected by the force of Earth's gravity or the physical processes that would separate mixtures by density. The NanoRacks Cosmos investigation used the environment aboard the station to grow and assess the 3D structure of silver nitrate crystals. The molecular structure of these superior silver nitrate crystals also has applications in nanotechnology, such as creating silver nanowires for nanoscale electronics.
The WWV Amateur Radio Club will again host special event stations using the call sign WW0WWV to celebrate the 106th anniversary of WWV. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with all the event details.
The event will last 96 hours from 0000 UTC October 2nd through 2359 Zulu October 5th, 2025. Suggested frequencies are the .48s, 7.048 MHz CW, 7.248 MHz lower sideband, for example. There will be multiple operators across the country participating. Logs will be uploaded to the Logbook of the World and OQRS around October 20th. OQRS requests, though, that prior to October 20th, they will not show a QSO, but will afterwards. QSO card requests should be sent to WWW-ARC, P.O. Box 273226, Fort Collins, Colorado, 80527, or via OQRS. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
A self-addressed stamped envelope is always helpful. QSL card requests will not be processed until October 20th, 2025. For more information, including time slots and bands for which operators have signed up, visit WWV 106th Anniversary Special Event Station, October 2nd through the 5th, 2025.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. The AMSAT Board of Directors annual election ended on September 15th. Drew Glassbrenner, KO4MA, Jerry Buxton, N0JY, Barry Baines, WD4ASW, and Frank Karnauskas, N1UW, were elected to a 2-year term. Douglas Tabor, N6UA, will be the first alternate serving a 1-year term. The board will meet prior to the AMSAT Symposium in Phoenix on October 16th and 17th. The Board of Directors meeting is open to all, unless due to an NDA they must have a closed session. If you're new to satellites or have a question, there's a wealth of knowledge on the AMSAT bulletin board. You can ask from the simplest to the most difficult questions, and someone should be able to assist you. You can send your question and follow the replies by sending it to amsat-bb@amsat.org. If you're looking to see what satellites are actually operational, visit amsat.org, click on Satellite Resources, and click on Current Satellite Status. If you would like to find the operating frequencies of a particular satellite, click on the Satellite Resources again, and then Frequencies. It's broken down into FM, linear, and digital, so you can get exactly what you're looking for. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for this week's look at the solar weather and the terrestrial propagation report. Solar activity was at low levels this past week. Low-level C-class flaring was observed from regions 4216 and 4217, as well as from region 4213 just beyond the southwestern limb. Slight growth was observed in all spotted regions. No Earth-directed coronal mass ejections were observed. Solar activity is expected to be low, with a chance for an isolated minor to moderate M-class flare, through September 20th. Solar wind parameters were indicative of coronal whole high-speed stream influences. Solar wind speed increased to near 760 km per second early on September 15th, before subsiding to between 600 to 700 km per second. Solar wind parameters are expected to continue under the influence of a negative polarity coronal whole high-speed stream. Solar wind speed is likely to gradually diminish on September 20th. The geomagnetic field is expected to be at quiet levels on September 20th, and quiet to active on September 21st. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the VOCAP Online for Ham Radio website.
Just ahead in radio sport this week, September 20th through the 22nd, the ARRL 10 GHz NUP contest, CW phone and digital. September 20th through the 21st, a lot of contest. September 20th through the 21st, the Scandinavian Activity Contest, that's CW. The New Jersey QSO Party, CW and phone. The Texas QSO Party, CW phone and digital. The Iowa QSO Party, CW phone and digital. Also on the 20th through the 21st, the New Hampshire QSO Party, CW phone and digital. And on September 20th through the 21st, the Washington State Salmon Run, CW and phone. September 21st, the North American Sprint, RTTY digital. And on September 22nd, the 144 MHz Fall Sprint, CW phone and digital. And remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming Section, State, and Division Convention, September 19th through the 21st, the Duke City Ham Fest, hosting the ARRL New Mexico State Convention. That's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. September 20th through the 21st, the Midwest Superfest, hosting the ARRL Central Division Convention in Chillicothe, Illinois. September 27th, the ARRL Dakota Division Convention, Moorhead, Minnesota. October 4th, the Rock Hill Ham Fest, hosting the ARRL South Carolina Section Convention. That's in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And on October 10th through the 12th, Pacificon, hosting the ARRL Pacific Division Convention. That's in San Ramon, California. And also remember to search the ARRL Hamfest and Convention database to find more events in your area. Churches and Chapels on the Air, known as CHOTA, took place on September 13th, 2025. CHOTA encourages ham radio operators to activate from local churches. The event, organized in 2006 in the United Kingdom, was a way to bring awareness to a local fundraising event. In 2024, 54 stations were on the air across the globe. In England, the Halifax and District Amateur Radio Society, again this year, activated the Methodist Church in the moorland village of Blackshaw Head, West Yorkshire. The grand total for the day was 122 contacts on HF, with around 16 of those being CHOTA to CHOTA contacts. More information can be found at the WACRAL website.
AMSAT was well represented at the 2025 Ham Exposition held in Marlborough, Massachusetts. The event was also the ARRL New England Convention. The booth was appropriately decked out with the AMSAT ambassador flag, as well as other signage from previous events. An arrow antenna was displayed on a portable rotation system, plus a 3D printed model of the 3U Golf Tee satellite with deployable solar panels. An AMSAT CubeSat simulator was operating during the event and sold on Sunday. AMSAT provided a door prize, a copy of the SAT PC32 software that was won by Roger Pushor, NK1L. On Saturday afternoon, Burns Fisher presented AMSAT Golf Tee software, How Does It Work, during the forum. His talk was about flight software on Golf Tee, including how multiple processors are coordinated. A second presentation, entitled SDR Transponder Transceiver, was delivered by Ray Brogers, WA1CYB. Ray is a member of the AMSAT engineering team.
Nominations for Orlando Hamcation's 2026 awards are now open. There are 3 award categories: the Golden West Ambassador of the Year, the Carol Perry Educator of the Year, and a new category, the Amateur Radio Hero of the Year. Nominations may now be submitted for each of the 3 categories. Links to each award category with details of their criteria and the nomination forms can be found at www.hamcation.com/award. Hamcation 2026 runs from February 13th through the 15th in Orlando, Florida, and is hosting the ARRL Southeastern Division Convention.
Cell phone jamming is illegal in the United States, but the FCC is considering whether to give prisons permission to jam the cell phones of inmates. The Federal Communications Commission hopes to grant federal and state prisons the right to jam mobile phones that have been smuggled into inmates. The Commission has scheduled a vote this month to remove a restriction that keeps the prisons from such jamming. The inmates are not authorized to have the phones, which the Commission said are being used to assist them in conducting criminal activity while behind bars. The United States prohibits the use and even the sale or distribution of any equipment that can jam authorized signals, such as radio communication, police radar, GPS devices, and cell phones. Jamming is forbidden under the Communications Act of 1934, which has been amended and updated since its original drafting. The vote is scheduled for September 30th.
Hams in India, who received amateur radio licenses in paper form, are being required to replace those certificates with a digital license no later than September 15 by logging into Saral Sanchar, a web-based portal of the Department of Telecommunications. There's no application fee for the process, which provides amateurs with a QR code, an authenticated certificate. This is the equivalent of the amateur radio booklets that had been issued manually with paper certificates until December 31 of 2019. In early 2020, India began issuing all new and renewed amateur radio certificates digitally. The telecommunication rules of 2024 now require that the holders of the older paper certificates use the digital web-based portal as well. Failure to migrate will mean that when the license expires, it cannot be renewed.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
The 3Y Zero-K de-expedition to Bouvet Island has packed its shipping container of gear. The team spent the weekend near Oslo, Norway, getting things ready, including generators, tents, tools, and, most importantly, radios, antennas, and amplifiers. This checks off another large box on the to-do list before they depart in February of next year. This international team of radio amateurs is aiming to activate the number 10 most wanted DX entity, Bouvet Island, in February 2026. With 24 operators, 2 camps, and a load of gear, they hope to provide a lot of QSOs to those who need the entity for their DXCC totals. Bouvet is in the South Atlantic Ocean, 1,600 miles from Cape Town, South Africa, and 1,000 miles north of continental Antarctica. ARRL Education and Learning Support Specialist Max Friedman, November 4, Mike Lima, is part of the team. At 21 years of age, he will be the youngest person to ever set foot on the island and is the youngest operator known in a top 10 de-expedition. He is excited for the opportunity. "I have learned a lot being a part of the 3Y0K team," said Friedman. "A lot of work goes into a de-expedition, more than most people think. It is an honor to work with these high-performing ham radio operators to get everything prepared for February." You can find out more about the de-expedition at 3y0k.com.
Attendees at the Radio Club of America's Technical Symposium and Awards Banquet can expect more from the experience by taking a side trip the day before to such nearby sites as the Goddard Space Center and the Cryptologic Museum of the U.S. National Security Agency. Motor coach tours will be available for both on Friday, November 21st. The symposium and banquet will take place on November 22nd at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Washington, D.C. The banquet is held every year to celebrate achievements in every area of wireless innovation. For details about the tours or the RCA event itself, visit radioclubofamerica.org. That's radioclubofamerica, all one word, .org.
It's time for this week's edition of AMSAT Satellite Shorts from all over. This week, we begin on Mars. Rolling across the rugged, rusty red terrain on Mars, NASA's Perseverance rover came upon some rocks with peculiar green, blue, black, and white dots. After detailed image analysis, scientists have come to a potentially encouraging conclusion. If those speckled rocks were formed like they are on Earth, they might be evidence of a past life on the dusty planet. The rocks very well could be the clearest sign of life that we've ever found on Mars, which is incredibly exciting. Acting NASA Administrator Sean P. Duffy said in a news conference this past Wednesday. The findings were published in the journal Nature on September 10th. Next, Alex Shofkopleas VE3 NEA has developed a Windows program called Skyroof that combines satellite tracking and SDR functions in one application. Those using SDRs as receivers for satellite downlinks can now see all satellite traces on the waterfall labeled with satellite names and the boundaries of the transponder on the screen. The program follows the Doppler shift, and all frequency tuning is done visually with a mouse. Provision is made for CAT control on a separate external uplink transceiver. And our final story includes Zimir Radtel Electronics Company, Limited of Fuji, China. The company has introduced a 12-watt FM VHF UHF handheld transceiver, which they claim will operate in full duplex across bands. Full duplex is preferred for satellite operation and is rarely offered in handheld radios. The radio also includes reception of AM aircraft frequencies and wideband commercial FM broadcast frequencies. The Radtel R8000 sells for less than $120 US. Another model, the Radtel RT69, adds GPS and 222 MHz band, as well as some shortwave SWL coverage. It sells for less than $200 in the U.S.
A popular radio personality who was also a ham radio operator has been honored posthumously by the Museum of Broadcast Communications. An amateur radio operator with a flair for and a following in late-night broadcast radio is one of 8 inductees into the Radio Hall of Fame for 2025. Dale Summers, WB6OM, who became a silent key in 2012 at the age of 68, gained popularity as the so-called trucking bozo on AM radio, a nickname the radio personality garnered during his highly rated overnight program that was a hit with the nation's truck drivers. The show originated on WLW-AM in Cincinnati before moving to Sirius XM radio. The Museum of Broadcast Communications has inducted Dale and 7 other broadcast notables who have passed away as legends. They include late on-air personalities Amos Brown, Jed the Fish, and the Big 89's WLS-AM's Don Wade. Also honored, the late broadcast engineer Richard Burden, research executive Joanne Church, scriptwriter and producer Erna Phillips, and programming executive Steve Smith.
As this year brings the solar maximum of cycle 25, a different kind of solar storm has been raging, one that challenges the long-standing and prevailing paradigm scientists use to help arrive at forecasts. Sociologist and statistician Frank Howell, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, has done an extensive study of this so-called National Aeronautics and Space Administration and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration prediction formula, which uses a consensus methodology pitting it against the work of solar physicist Scott McIntosh of Linkup Space. In this busy, high-profile year for the Sun and its activity, Frank has written extensively and presented a series of virtual talks on the subject in the United States and overseas. He has long discussed the competing models extensively in his blog, k4fmh.com. Frank's most recent talk, Progress in the Revolution, Sunspot Cycle Forecast Accuracy at Cycle 25, was given to Perrine Ham in the United Kingdom and can be seen on their YouTube channel. Whether the NASA team or the McIntosh team prevails, one thing is certain. Like coronal mass ejections themselves, this scientific competition over solar prediction promises to rage for some time to come.
During the pandemic, Minnesota's parks provided amateur radio operators with welcoming places to get on the air with friends or just gather in a safe social setting. Many of those parks have since evolved into the birthplace of an organization that encourages POTA activations throughout the state by hosting activities, awards, and formal events with the help of a group known as MINPOTA. Supported by the Stillwater Amateur Radio Association and a coalition of other clubs, MnPOTA has spent 2 years hosting year-round meetings and POTA activity days, including a Minnesota POTA Day in June. There's also an awards scheme that recognizes activators and hunters in different categories and different modes each spring. Colin O'Connor, KE0IYN, a board member of the Stillwater Club, has said that all this activity has nurtured and expanded Minnesota's populations of POTA participants. He said that in the Stillwater Club alone, between 1/3 and 1/2 of the more than 180 club members have become active in POTA. Next year, MnPOTA will add a new focus to its activities, encouraging technician class license holders to get involved. Multiple and single stationary activations will be scheduled specifically on 6 meters and 10 meters, enabling the techs to put their privileges to good use. In the meantime, Colin encourages other POTA enthusiasts in different states to consider a similar effort, even if they start small. He said that even 15 to 20 people is considered successful.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
The Young Ladies Radio League has announced 6 scholarship recipients for this year, 2 each for the Ethel Smith K2LMB Memorial Scholarship, the Mary Lou Brown NM7N Memorial Scholarship, and the Martha Wessel K0EPE Memorial Scholarship. Congratulations to Grace Pape, K8LG, and Needy Smith, KN6OJJ, for their selection as recipients of the Ethel Smith Scholarship. Grace is a top contester and youth mentor. She is studying electrical engineering at Cedarville University in Ohio. Needy is a PhD student at the University of Colorado Boulder, where she is studying toward her PhD in aerospace engineering sciences. She is the communications officer for the school's amateur radio club. Madison Kloger, KC1KJT, and Cameron Ellis, WX5CAM, have been chosen for the Martha Wessel Scholarship. Madison is active in public service and emergency communications, and worked recently with the Federal Emergency Management Agency in its Office of Planning and Preparedness. She has a bachelor's degree in emergency management and is pursuing her master's in cybersecurity. Cameron is entering her final year at Texas A&M University, where she is studying meteorology and atmospheric sciences. She became involved in ham radio through the school's Texas Aggie Storm Chasers organization. Rachel Jones, KO4HLC, and Catherine Forson, KT5KMF, are receiving the Mary Lou Brown Scholarship. Rachel, a PhD candidate in aerospace sciences at the University of North Dakota, has been a presenter on radio space science for students and is currently the winter manager of KC4USV at McMurdo Station in Antarctica. Catherine is a senior meteorology student at Texas A&M University and active as an officer in the campus radio club W5AC. She is also a liaison between the club and the Texas Aggie Storm Chasers, where she serves as radio and licensing director. Catherine received the ARRL's Hiram Percy Maxim Award in 2021.
JAXA, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, has announced that 5 Japanese CubeSats were deployed from the International Space Station on September 19th. The deployment event for those satellites was broadcast via the YouTube JAXA channel. 4 of the CubeSats, carrying scientific and educational payloads, will operate in the amateur bands, and radio amateurs around the world are invited to participate in the individual projects. GHS-01 is a 2U-size CubeSat equipped with a camera for photographing the Earth, a sensor for checking the state of the satellite, and an attitude control device. In response to commands from ground station, the satellite-mounted camera photographs the Earth from space and transmits the image data to the ground. In order for amateur radio users around the world to voluntarily acquire image data taken by this satellite by radio, the date and time of image transmission will be published. Also, the satellite carries a Digitalker mission. Audio data is transmitted from a ground station and stored in the satellite. The voice data is transmitted from the satellite as an analog FM voice signal, and a message is broadcast from space. The date and time the message will be sent will be published on the website. The satellite was built by Gifu University with technical cooperation from using satellite radio waves with sister schools of universities and high schools such as Lithuania, Australia, Kenya, South Korea, and Taiwan. A downlink on 437.090 MHz has been coordinated with 20 word per minute CW, 1K2 AFSK, 9K6 GMSK, and Digitalker voice. Dragonfly, coordinated by Kyushu Institute of Technology, is part of the joint global multi-nation bird satellite project, BirdX, and funded by Amateur Radio Digital Communications in the U.S. The 2U CubeSat will carry APRS digipeaters on 145.825 MHz, as well as a store and forward messaging system. In addition to the VHF APRS frequency, a UHF downlink for CW beacon and telemetry using 4K8 GMSK will transmit at 437.375 MHz. A ground terminal competition will be held on Dragonfly. Stars Me 2, a 1U CubeSat built by Shizuoka University, features an Earth observation camera, but the real experimentation takes place on the AX25 radio downlinks on which those photos are transmitted back to Earth. Reception success rate at receiving ground stations will be measured at band rates of 1.2 kbps, 9.6 kbps, and 115.2 kbps. The coding gain of the error correction scheme will be measured on the downlinks, and the reception performance with polarization diversity at multiple terrestrial receiver stations developed by amateur radio operators will be evaluated. The goal is to learn more about how large data sets, such as images, are best transmitted from space. UHF downlinks with CW, 1K2 AFSK, 9K6 FSK, and 115.2 BPS GMSK are coordinated for 437.350 MHz, 437.400 MHz, and 437.200 MHz. RSP3 is also a 1U CubeSat carrying a camera, but in this case the cameras will not be aimed at Earth but at the stars. The main mission is to capture the star data by camera, convert it to an audible data, and deliver the audio to the ground as a stellar symphony. After acquiring data of stars and constellations captured by the onboard camera, an onboard AI will compose sounds from the star data and transmit it to the ground via an FM digitalker. In addition, digital data will be sent using various band rates and modulation modes, and a digital QSL card stored on the satellite before launch will be transmitted via SSTV after amateurs have uploaded their call signs from the ground. A downlink at 437.050 MHz will be shared by the FM digitalker, 1200 BPS AFSK on FM, 9600 BPS GMSK, and 24,000 BPS for FSK and OQP SK.
On International Shakeout Day, October 16, 2025, at 10:16 a.m. local time, millions of people worldwide will practice earthquake safety. After you drop, cover, and hold on, amateur radio operators have a unique role to play. Supporting the U.S. Geological Society by submitting WinLink DYFI or Did You Feel It reports. These reports provide valuable ground truth data that helps USGS monitor and respond to earthquakes. By sending your DYFI report via WinLink, you are not only testing our emergency communications readiness, but also contributing directly to a critical USGS data stream that informs science, emergency management, and community resilience.
Just as the schools are back throughout the UK, so is the DMR project launched by the Radio Society of Great Britain. The initiative was introduced last May to loan equipment to schools to enable students to feel comfortable with making QSOs on the air. Now it is back as the schools and colleges reopen this month. The Society's outreach team is working with teachers and, in partnership with the Radio Communications Foundation, they will pay license exam fees for 9 teachers who wish to set up ham radio clubs at their schools. Additional details are available from Chris Aitken, Mike 0, Whiskey, India Charlie, the youth chair, who can be reached at youthchampion.school@rsgb.org.uk.
The United Kingdom is poised to become Europe's first country offering legal satellite connectivity for smartphones. The regulator, Ofcom, has released a consultation authorizing the move and is requesting comments no later than October 10th. Making this service available to standard mobile phones would provide the most remote parts of the United Kingdom with the access needed to send texts, make phone calls, or even connect to the Internet, functions presently not possible in areas without mobile phone coverage. This is known as direct-to-device. An operation would be permitted after Ofcom has provided a variation to the licenses of mobile network operators. The change would also grant such use to mobile handsets and any other devices that make use of the SIM cards.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
And finally this week, 48 years ago, we launched Voyager 1. It's still nowhere near a star. Launched on September 5th, 1977, Voyager 1 has been racing through space at over 38,000 miles per hour. It's the most distant human-made object in existence, more than 15 billion miles from Earth, and it has already crossed the boundary into interstellar space. And yet, even moving that fast, it will take over 40,000 more years for Voyager 1 to be closer to the star AC plus 79 3888 than to our own sun. That's because AC plus 79 3888 is actually traveling faster toward Voyager 1 than the spacecraft is traveling toward it. For perspective, Voyager 1 hasn't even traveled a single light day yet. Light from the sun reaches Earth in just over 8 minutes. It takes light 1 day to travel about 16 billion miles, and Voyager hasn't quite made it that far in nearly half a century. That's not a failure of technology. That's just how vast space really is. The twin Voyager spacecraft were never designed to reach another star. Their original mission was to visit the outer planets, and they did, returning some of the most iconic images in space exploration history. But after completing their planetary tours, both Voyagers just kept going, powered by tiny nuclear batteries and carrying golden records with sounds and messages from Earth. Now they drift silently through the void. Their signals take over 22 hours to reach us. They'll eventually go dark, but their momentum will carry them forward for thousands of years, through a galaxy that makes even our fastest machines feel still.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard on nets and repeaters all across North America and around the world on great repeater systems like the KD5 DMT 145.290 and 443.025 MHz repeater system in Centerton and Garfield, Arkansas. Owned and operated by the Benton County Radio Operators Club, serving Northwest Arkansas, Southwest Missouri, and Northeast Oklahoma.
Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.